This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Sabrina Parsons on the show. She is the CEO of Palo Alto Software, and we're going to talk a lot about leading a software team and company and culture and all that stuff. Anyway, with all that being said, Sabrina, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here and excited to talk with you.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background, how your journey through tech has led you into becoming the CEO of Palo Alto Software.
Yeah, I will. It is not a traditional journey. I actually majored in history at Princeton University with a minor in early childhood education. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do when I got out of school. I grew up in the Bay Area and I returned to the Silicon Valley in 1996 when I graduated. And I actually got certified to teach elementary education in New Jersey, where Princeton is, as well as California. So my first year in the Silicon Valley, back in kind of my hometown and my area where I grew up, I was an elementary school teacher. I still am very passionate about education and I'm involved in lots of different ways, but it was a very frustrating experience to be fresh out of school with lots of theory and thoughts about how to educate and be in a very structured, rigid public school with a lot of more traditional old school ways of teaching. Meanwhile, 1996, the Silicon Valley had the dot-com explosion happening. At the time, we were not married, but my now husband was the 101st employee at Yahoo while I was teaching. And just all this cool stuff was happening in technology. And I was trying to bring the internet into my classroom in Sunnyvale, California, where I paid for my own internet connection so that the kids could actually be exposed to what the internet was. And here we were, like, in the Silicon Valley. So that just led to me realizing that I really wanted to and had a passion for what was going on with .com. And I jumped in and joined my first .com and kind of never looked back. But I've always brought that thread of educating and helping people really learn and understand. And now, as CEO of Palo Alto Software, the products that we put out there are all about educating entrepreneurs, educating small business owners, and helping them really learn how to do business planning, strategy, financial forecasting, but actually really do it the right way, which is not always the easy way. So it was, kind of a not straight path to technology in that journey. But from the moment that I jumped into tech, I knew, like, this is where I want to be. I love the fast innovation. I love the excitement of not knowing what's going to be here next year and how do you keep up.
Yeah, I have not quite the same journey at all, but somewhat similar. Where I was a history minor, I love history. I think it's super fascinating for me, and I do teach still part time at a local university. I think teaching is really exciting for me. It keeps me learning, and it forces me to stay fresh. I think to stay on top of the things that are changing. And right now with software and with everything, everything is changing really quickly. Even with entrepreneurship, that was actually my undergraduate degree was in entrepreneurship because I wanted to be part of that .com boom as it was happening. And, but also as part of the failures of it as well too. uh, One of the things that I think is important when it comes to building a small business or launching a team or just managing your own internal developers is as having a good culture. And you talk a lot about your culture at Palo Alto Software. Can you give us a little bit of oversight of what that is and kind of how you develop that over time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, well, number one is culture is going to be there, right? Whether it is purposeful or not, if you aren't purposeful about a culture, the culture will be there, the void will be filled. And then the question is that the culture you want? And so I think that was my big first learning lesson in terms of managing people, growing a company, and learning how to retain the the people who were excited to work with me and kind of follow on the vision of what we were trying to do, and really went through some pain and some failures in order to realize, like, oh, I have to articulate the culture and I have to be very purposeful, and this is part of some of these pain points that we're feeling as I grow this business has to do with a culture exists, and I'm not being I'm not being as purposeful and really leading with the intent I want on the culture. And the pain points really had to do with various hires, probably about 10, 15 years ago, that on paper were perfect, right? You're
Mhm.
growing the company, you're going out there, you need to find certain positions, and we hired a handful of people over the course of 3 or 4 years that had absolutely perfect resumes, great experience. On paper, they should have been perfect. And after like the fourth time, different positions, but that a person didn't work out, really had to think about what is happening and why am I hiring these people that seem like they had the perfect experience, but they don't seem to work out. It doesn't work. They don't like working here. The people on their team don't like them working here. No one's happy. Why? And that's when really took a step back with my leadership team and said, wait a minute, we got to really think about who we are and who we want to be. And that has to be part of our hiring. And so that was sort of this like eye-opening moment of like, "Oh, okay, there is a culture, we're just not articulating it." Because, going back to like what is a church? It's just a set of shared beliefs, values, practices, right? It's not, it sounds like it's some MBA thing, but it really isn't. Um, it's what we study in history, right? The culture
Mhm.
in Mesopotamia. Well, what's the culture in your company? And so one of the things that we did is really examine, okay, how does our business work? What are we trying to do? And who are the people who are successful? And so based on that, we came up with what we call the six you know, key pillars of our culture. So we rely on data as number one. We solve for the customer. We're transparent. We give you the autonomy to be awesome. We're picky about our peers and we value community. And those are the six things. And when you really like look at every single piece of that, part of what our culture is all about is if our employees can rely on data and make really good decisions. They don't need to be micromanaged. If they're always solving for the customer and they know who the customer is and what their pain points are, and they really care about the mission of that entrepreneur and the customer, then we don't need to micromanage them. If we're transparent and we share financials and we give all the information that we can, obviously there's HR privacy things we can't share with everybody, but other than that, we want to share everything with our employees and
Mhm.
particularly our financial health. Again, you do that, you don't need to micromanage people about spending or budgets or thinking carefully about where they want to spend and which deals are better and which deals don't fit with our mission. The autonomy to be awesome is actually the permission to have agency and not ask. And we even tell people, like, you know, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission, because if you're living our culture, you're going to make the right decisions. And then picky about our peers, if we hire really smart people who are smarter than us, then they're going to make the right decisions and we don't have to micromanage them. And then we value community because we live in a smaller town, Eugene, Oregon, and we really like to give back. But the one common theme with everything is we realized, and I realized with our leadership team, that we are terrible micromanagers. And if you hire someone who has this great resume, but maybe they've worked only at very large companies and they expect a different type of structure and middle management and directives. That person wasn't working out in our company. We needed people who were risk takers and who hated micromanagement, because all of us who lead the company are terrible at micromanaging.
Yeah, no, I think, going back to this whole idea of having like a written culture and a defined set of values is really good, because that, like, I like to think of it like bumpers in bowling, right? You put the bumpers up so people have their lane and they can, have the autonomy to go whichever direction they want to go, as long as they bounce off those bumpers, as long as they're following those cultural norms and they're staying within that guidelines, and they don't have to be micromanaged, and they're going to make right decisions. And I think that's fantastic. Um, I have a question about transparency. So, when it comes to being so transparent with your employees, which I value transparency really high. That's one of my core values as well that I have on my team. But I know, like, taking the step to go from a company that maybe doesn't do that today to shift into that, what advice would you have to someone that's in those situations? Because I used to work at a company where everything was locked down. We didn't know how much money the company made. We didn't know anything except for what our budget line item was, and we weren't allowed to, like, share information. It was very, siloed, and not a good environment. But and I wouldn't know how to fix that. So how would you? What advice would you have to someone that's in that situation?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is that when you don't share information, people make assumptions and they think they know.
Yes.
So, I remember reading a book. It was someone, and I can't right now think of who it was, but he did a lot of speaking in a lot of companies, did a lot of engagements to turn companies around, talk to employees, manufacturers, technology, kind of industries all over the map, and had all this data to show that, like, if you don't say anything about, say, profits, for instance, everyone, no matter what company they are, across the board, is absolutely wrong in the profit margins they think a company has. Where most companies are lucky to be at, 10, 11, 12%, like, that's great. That rarely happens. A lot of industries are down at, 2 and 3% net profit, and that's what their profit margins are. Um, but if you don't say it, if you don't articulate that to people, most people will think that your profits are between 25 and 40%. And that's just something they think, right? Because they don't know and they're not running the business. And so
Mhm.
that would be the biggest thing I say to people if they're afraid and they don't know where to start is, you already have people who think things, and you walking down the information isn't helping you because they're not even in the right ballpark.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example. And, I was talking to somebody not too long ago, and I told them, somewhere similar. I said, if you're not sharing the information, then if it were me and I wasn't hearing anything, the voices in my head will always tell me the worst case scenario. They're always going to be negative, and it's going to be a lot worse, than if you just told me what the truth is. If you just tell me, we can't share this with you right now. Well, I'm assuming the worst. You guys, otherwise you would tell me, right? If it was good, you would tell me. So it's obviously terrible, you know. And so yeah, I definitely value transparency for sure. One of the other things that when you were talking about books, it reminded me of a guest I had on not too long ago. He has a book called Honestly Speaking, and I've been listening to that in Audible. And one of the things he talks about with culture is that everything that you do in your company and every employee does, every reply to a Slack message or Teams message and every email that's sent is either solidifying and building that culture or tearing it down. And, you know, when it comes to having something written, because a lot of people will say, well, our culture is this, but they don't have anything defined. How important was it for you to have that defined culture deck and that set that's out there that everybody can see?
Yeah, I think that's I think it's key to making sure that the culture continues, right? You can say
Mhm.
this is the culture and articulate it, but it's almost like with the question about transparency, you have to have something that employees can hold you to. You have to have something that states this is what we stand for and invite employees to call you on it if you're talking the talk and not walking the walk.
Mm.
They need to be able to say, "This doesn't fit with our culture. You have said that this is what the culture is, and you aren't this thing that we're doing doesn't fit with the culture." And we've made some changes to the culture deck over time because of employees pointing things out and saying, "Hey, this doesn't quite fit," or "What do we do here?" or "This isn't resonating with me." We added a slide to the culture deck that I think is titled like "Don't ruin it for the rest of us," because we don't like to have a lot of policies. That's part of our culture. You hire smart people who make good decisions, and you try to minimize the number of employee policies you have. But that requires that you really that employees trust you and you trust them and that they're making good decisions. So if they're booking an airline flight, it requires that they know better than to book the $5,000 flight when there's a $600 flight that's available.
Mhm.
Um, that being said, we couple that with I always tell employees, and it's in our culture deck, like, I am never going to ask you to do something that I won't do myself. So that doesn't mean take a red eye because it's cheaper, because I hate red eyes and I don't want anybody else to have to take a red eye. But it does mean, yeah, you can't buy the $5,000 fare because you're going to get more status on your mileage account and you want to go on that airline when there's this other ticket available. And if you do that, then we have to have a travel policy. And now all of us have to follow a travel policy because you ruined it for the rest of us. And so those are some of the things that we've added over time to address some of these issues. But I think writing it down allows employees to hold you accountable in the same way you hold employees accountable to be part of the culture that you want.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, and I love that line, "Don't ruin it for the rest of us," because there's always that if you don't, like, say it, someone will. It always seems to happen. I know somebody that worked at a company, they had, during COVID, when everybody went remote, they decided to go with a, unlimited PTO policy, which, it's I think it's great, and they had one employee that took 30 days off before March, and it's like, "Well, how do you even do that?" You know? So then I had to say, "Okay, well, unlimited within reason," and then eventually I had to go to like, "Hey, it's 25 days now, period. We can't do this."
Yeah, it's interesting. We actually, for a short amount of time, probably 10 years ago, it wasn't during COVID, it was earlier than that. We attempted to go to unlimited PTO, and ended up not doing it because we had got some very direct feedback from employees who had worked at larger tech companies in the Valley that did unlimited PTO. And they said, it makes me really uncomfortable. And these are people who aren't abusing it. These were people who were really good workers, really motivated, innovative, loyal. And they said, it makes me really uncomfortable because in my past experiences, unlimited PTO actually means don't take any. Unlimited PTO actually means, don't you see the rest of us working 7 days a week, 52
Yeah.
weeks a year? Like, aren't you motivated? And they were like, I just want to know that I'm allowed to take time off. I want to plan for it. I want to feel like I've earned it. And I don't want to have to guess what's reasonable. Just give us reasonable PTO policy and, like, let us have that. Don't have me guessing and then being annoyed with the person who takes way too much and I haven't taken any.
Yeah, yeah, I knew someone that went from a working with PTO policy to an unlimited PTO policy, and they took way less because they said they felt the pressure of having to be there. It wasn't like a said pressure, it was just like, you know, "I feel like I have to be here because my boss isn't taking off, so therefore I shouldn't take off."
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that was a huge one. what is my boss doing,
Mhm.
is really important in terms of the culture, because if you write down a culture and you as the leader and the boss are not following the culture, then other people know that that's just BS and that's not really there. So part of our culture is that we want people to have a healthy balance, and we don't want people in the office 80 hours a week. If you look at all the data, and we have people in our company who have been with us for 20 years, 15 years, 18 years, our retention is fantastic. And that is because, and these people are loyal and smart and innovative, and the knowledge they have from being there for so long with us is, unparalleled, and you can't, like, that's so much value, not to mention not having to hire again and train again. But yeah, I mean, it's just important that everybody, like, understands what is the boss doing? What is that example? And are they walking the walk? So if I'm answering emails at 10 o'clock at night, I'm sending the message that you better be reading those emails. And
Mhm.
so even if I happen to be working at 10 o'clock at night, I won't send the email till the next morning, because I want to be cautious about having people understand that we mean it. And I do think that if people treat their work like, a marathon and not a sprint, they are gonna be more innovative. And if someone's like, "Ugh, I'm just done this afternoon. I can't think. I don't like things aren't working in my head. I'm gonna go for a run." Oftentimes that's when you figure things out, right? If you've
Yeah.
got the smart, loyal employees, it's not really like they're not thinking. You're just giving them space and time to kind of figure things out, and not like pressure them in this, like, you must work 80 hours a week.
Yeah, I fell into that trap, of sending emails in the evenings, and people would reply, and I always reply back, say, "Hey, you don't have to answer my emails." Like, "But you sent it. If you send it, I feel like I have to answer." So then I learned, I don't know if an update came out, it's a couple years ago, but now you can click that send at and choose a time to send it. So I have them all sent. They all go out at 8 a.m. in the morning. So it's like no more bothering people in the evenings when I'm doing something. I don't expect others to do that. Um, One of the things that's in your culture deck quite a bit is trust. And you guys have several slides about building trust and having relationships to build trust. How do you go about encouraging people to be trustworthy?
So I think one of the big things, and the first time it's somebody's newer and they're in that situation, that's sort of the test, is you have to allow people to have failures.
Mhm.
If you're asking them to innovate, to take chances, if you're saying things like ask for forgiveness and not permission, just follow our mission and our values. Um, we want a culture that's about innovation, fast pace, minimum viable product. That means sometimes you're going to test something and it doesn't work. And so if that happens and like the hammer comes down because you failed, then people are like, "Oh, I don't trust this." So you really have to, like, that's been the easiest way to show people that trust, to say, "Hey, you know, you took the calculated risk. It didn't work out. Let's pivot. Let's move quickly. We learned a lot from this test, even though it was a failure. And oftentimes you learn more from the failures than the successes. Okay, let's take that, let's implement it. Let's move forward." And that starts building that trust, where then people aren't afraid to deliver bad news, because bad news actually then helps you make better decisions in the future. But in order for people to trust, they have to see that. They have to really see that, okay, I'm not getting in trouble. I can do these things. And, this company really does stand behind what they do. And I think transparency also builds trust. When they actually see our financials, when they know and we track and we share all of our KPIs. What is our churn? What is our ARPA? What is our lifetime value? What is it today? What are we trying to get to? And we share all those key drivers and where our metrics are on a regular basis. That sort of, along with our financials and revenue and all of that, then that helps build the trust.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I think it's really good that you guys you're not just telling people, "Hey, we want you to take risks. We want you to not be afraid to fail," but you're actually letting them fail and letting them, without, being fired, for it or,
Yeah, but I think we've all had that, that thing that you've done that didn't go right, but you learned so much. And then you had that aha moment of like, wait a minute, I know what we should do now because I can see all of this data and I can understand it. And especially in technology, things are moving so quickly. You're going to have failures. I mean, like, my gosh, right now, given where AI is and how quickly everything is changing,
Yeah.
you gotta just be out there testing things, and some things are gonna work and some things are not.
Yeah, and I like what you actually have several slides in there about testing and about, um uh, MVPs and that quality is still important, even if you're moving fast, and even if you're, I think it was Zuckerberg that famously said, move fast and break things. We want to move fast and not break things, maybe move fast and fix things, but whatever it is, you're talking about having quality and how that's an important part of your culture is to build with quality. Talk a little bit about how you determine that.
Yeah, we have a saying that we say, "Scrappy, not crappy." Um, and, it's hard for people to find that line because you want to be able to move quickly and say, "Okay, let's test this. Let's see what happens." And so the thought process has to be, how do we not take this project and put in so many requirements that all of a sudden it takes 4 weeks and 5 departments to implement? How do we take it down to what is an MVP, but the content is thought through. There's no spelling errors. It's good graphics. It's represents our brand. We've just recognized that this is a test. And so if that means we have to test this cohort because we don't have to do engineering to change a price for this cohort, let's just test that cohort and not everything else. And then we can focus on still putting something out that represents our brand and our quality without making it a much bigger project that is going to take tons of time. And so there's a little bit of a back and forth. And in the beginning, when people join, we invite them to collaborate a lot with leadership, with their managers, with their team to figure out what does scrappy, not crappy really mean so that they can legitimately test things, put things out quickly, but not low quality things. And it is a
Mhm.
balance. It's hard to find, but really helping people understand it's about not letting requirements balloon out to be so big that a project now is 3 months long because that's a very expensive project and then that's not a test anymore. Let's wait to make it that huge project until you figure out what can we test to validate those ideas, and then we can spend much more money in a longer project.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Um, you also talk a little bit about, in-person collaboration and valuing that. In a society where people are, highly remote, how do you, encourage that?
Yeah, and it's been interesting since COVID because we're still mostly all here in Eugene, Oregon. We do have some employees who became contractors because they moved out of the state of Oregon, and their jobs fit that, salespeople, people where you could do that. Um, it's been a more of a balance since COVID. I mean, obviously pre-COVID, people were at the office 5 days a week, and pretty much 99% of our employees were in Eugene, Oregon. Post-COVID, I would say 80% of our employees are in Oregon, and we do not require or force employees to come into the office, but we have a strong preference for 3 days a week.
Mm,
Um, Post COVID, we started with 2 days a week, so Tuesdays and Thursdays. A lot of people dragged their feet. A lot of people didn't want to do it. They really pushed back, and we said, let's just try it. Like, it's if it doesn't work, we're not going to force you. We're not writing a policy. We're not putting in a manual. And it actually was very eye-opening. The more people came to the office and the more people were there on Tuesday and on Thursday, the more people liked it. And it was actually our employees who asked for a third day. But what they wanted and the reason they asked us to really encourage the third day is if you come into the office on a Monday, no one's there, you're not gonna come back next Monday. But if
right.
you come in and the office is full and bustling, people actually like that, and they like the human interaction, getting beyond the Zoom screen, that you can have the water cooler discussion. You can sit down in the break room and have lunch with someone who's not even on your team, but who you like and you want to hang out and you miss their friendship and you don't have it anymore because it's just this 2D screen. So, um, the first step was really getting people to buy in and say, just try it. And then once everybody was there was a resounding sort of, oh, wow, I forgot how much I like to be around
Yeah.
other people. And yeah, it makes brainstorming easier than having to sort of figure out, oh, the quiet introverted person who never speaks up in Zoom is more likely to actually say something if you're in person and there's just 6 of you chatting in a room.
Yeah, also, there's also that, serendipitous moments where you just kinda walk by somebody and you're asking how they're doing, and they mention this thing that you weren't aware of, and you're like, "Oh, well, we're doing something similar to that. Let's talk about it," and then come up with, some synergies there. And also new employees. If you hire a new employee and you're fully remote, how do you meet people? How do you develop that, history with them? Because it's kinda creepy if you just Zoom call someone just to say, "Hey, I'm new. I wanna talk to you." Like but if you just bump into somebody in the hallway or you're chatting while you're getting a drink or something like that, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it turns out, generally speaking, people are social, right? They like it.
Yes.
They build friendships at work. It's harder to build friendships if you're all virtual. Then all of a sudden your friendships are not at work, they're in other places and you're not building those relationships. And yes, the water cooler talk that turns into an idea happens more often than I think people realize when
Mhm.
they're only virtual all the time.
Yeah, I think it happened for me, it happens a lot. Like, it just seems to happen, more often than it doesn't happen, I think. And when we were remote, I noticed that there was a lot of missing ideas, a lot of missing, things moved a lot slower not being together.
Yep. No, absolutely.
What are some other key components of the culture that, you think are super important we haven't hit on yet?
So I would say the last one that is really important and has turned out to be something that our employees really love. And when you think about what benefits are you going to give people, do we have a keg and a ping pong table and like an arcade area, right? Like the sort of infamous Silicon Valley
Mhm,
perks. One of the things that we are committed to is giving back to our community. We have a grant program through Oregon Community Foundation where we fund a grant. What I realized is over the years, being in Eugene, Oregon, it's about 250,000 people. When I'm not working, I'm very involved in the community. I volunteer a lot. I'm on boards. I'm involved with the school board. So I just was in the community a lot. So I would get pitched by nonprofits for Palo Alto Software to donate and become a donor and a sponsor. And over time, it became like I was the gatekeeper, and it
mm,
was always me deciding where we put money we had allocated for community donations. So we turned that into an employee-led group. So we now have a grant. We did it through Oregon Community Foundation. They distribute it. And we have a grant committee that changes. We do 2 grant cycles a year, and so the committee changes twice a year. Employees volunteer to be on the committee, and they get to decide who we give money to based on a set of values and missions supporting technology, supporting STEM, supporting women in STEM, and then supporting the environment because Eugene, Oregon is, and people who are in Oregon really love the natural world. They do a lot of things outside,
mhm.
hike, backpack, mountain bike, kayak. So we give back to environmental. So those are the things we give to, but the employees get to decide and they get to read grants and they get to decide where we give money away. And it's been this huge benefit employees love. They love that we do it, but more than that, they love that they get to be involved and decide where the money goes and that that's not just something I decide.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, I think giving back to the community is super important, and I can tell you a little short story. When I was early on in my management career, I was managing a team of like 6 people, and I was a new software team manager. and I was terrible. We had a high turnover. Our team was kind of falling apart, and I got this really good mentor that kind of guided me in several different ways. And one of the things he said is like, why don't you do something outside of work together, something productive, something that can help you. Um, and I knew my church was doing all these like volunteer activities, and I'm going to do one with my team. So our team, I set us up to where we left noon on Friday one day, and we went to a an attention home where they had like orphans and women that were abused were in there, and they had like a playground, and we just went and pressure washed the playground equipment. Very simple. And the team loved it, and I thought they would kinda hate it, taking a bunch of software engineers out to, like, go pressure wash or whatever, but they loved it, and I said, "Okay, we're gonna do one of these once a quarter." So we started doing them once a quarter, and after, like, the 3rd one, the next month, somebody said, "Hey, I've already booked us for one next Friday. Can we do 2 of them this quarter?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I guess." And then the team just started doing it for me, and they started setting them up, and they were picking their own charities and their own maybe we would go to a soup kitchen, but instead of serving soup, we would bring stuff, and we'd make grilled cheese sandwiches and things like, that would be a little different. And the team loved it. Our turnover rate just went from, I had probably the highest rate in the company, to we didn't lose a person in like 5 years. It was an incredible turnaround of the team. And I think when you serve together, when you benefit the community together, it builds a bond that is greater than what you could do at work. It gives you purpose that's outside of the walls of your building.
And I feel like it feels more authentic to people, which is why that works, right? Whereas,
Mhm.
like, when you're thinking about, like, "Oh, we've got a keg and we've got video games and we've got this," people know what that means. What that
Yeah.
actually means is they don't want you to leave.
Yep,
That's why they
exactly.
have all of those things. It's not because they actually want you to drink beer or play video games. They're just trying to keep you there versus this is a perk that people really feel in a different way.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Um, and yeah, and I like the fact that you let the community, the employees come up with, where to send the money as long as it goes within these criteria, which again, you're giving them like, bumpers and a bumper and a dolly and letting them pick which way to go. And I think that's fantastic. And I'm sure you get some really good stories and success from that too.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been so much fun, and just to also just feel like when our employees and their kids are in school, that when the kid says, "My parent, my mom works at Palo Alto Software," and people go, "Oh yeah, didn't they just come and clean up McKinsey River site?"
Yeah.
That's a really cool feeling, and then the kid gets to go home and be like, "Mom, did" you know, "so and so said you guys cleaned up McKinsey River." It's been great.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. Sabrina, this has been a fun conversation. I really appreciate having you on and learning about culture and how we can implement this at our places. If there's anybody listening that wants to reach out to you and learn more about Palo Alto Software, will learn more about the culture that you guys are bringing, how can they connect with you online?
Yeah, if they, want to, they can connect with me, Sabrina at paloalto.com. I love to hear questions. Not afraid to put my email out there. I like to interact. If they're curious about our software, liveplan.com, where really our mission is to help people succeed in business. And yeah, I welcome any questions. I love working with people, mentoring people, and yeah, it's really a passion for me to help people succeed in business.
Awesome. Well, again, Sabrina, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate having you on.
Yeah, thank you so much, John.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to, click on their links, and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. And make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.